Who is Miss Atifa?
It's a very interesting question. Who is Elsie? I'm a ghetto girl who made it to the UN.
In this episode, we bring to you the dynamic, amazing, and ever-jolly UNDP resident representative for Uganda, Her Excellency Ms.Elsie G. Atafa. Ms. Atafa is a goal and results-driven managerial level development professional. She is a visionary leader who has over 20 years of global experience. Her unique depth and breadth of knowledge in organizational development process is well acknowledged, notably strategy and policy development, communication and branding, and creation of innovative business models and solutions to development challenges. And her passion for women and youth can never be missed.
This is Religion and Enterprise Television. My name is Emmanuel Detumi, President of Human Capital International. And today we are in the office of the UNDP Uganda office talking to the representative, Ms. Elsie Atifa.
Yeah.
I mean, listening to you is so exciting, and I like your optimism. I like the enthusiasm with which you are, articulating what you've been doing. And I like the issue about working with the ambassadors and what have you. Now, you agree with me that one of the critical issues to do with the AFCTA is free movement of people. So I just want to find out, in your conversations and policy issues, dialogues that you are having with all these ambassadors, are you also talking about the free movement of people on the continent?
Well, I think the free movement of people in the continent is embedded in itself in the protocols of the AFCFTA.
Yes.
And I think what is important is how do we make sure that we operationalize it and we make it happen? And so, I mean, we don't get involved in the country-to-country conversation.
Right.
That we leave to the ministries of foreign affairs because we are not parties to their conversation.
Right. I'm talking about the whole UNDP regional office and all of you, since you talk to the ambassadors.
I think that's always been an important one. I think there's always been some of the stakeholder meetings that we've had on the AFCFTA have always raised these issues in terms of how do we make sure that we can truly facilitate free movement of people. Because if we are still talking trade and you still need a visa, in many countries, you still have to wait for days on end. You're not even guaranteed a visa sometimes.
Right.
I mean, there's no way that we will optimize the FCFTA implementation.
Absolutely.
So that has always come up in the meetings that we have facilitated.
Okay.
And I think there are good signs. We've already seen some of the countries moving towards that. I think Rwanda recently announced
South Africa is also doing quite a bit.
And I think Kenya is also coming up, as I understand, by the end of the year. And I think if we can get to that point where we can all move freely, this would be great.
Wonderful.
But there's still a lot more to be done in that space. Yeah.
Before I move away from the women issue, and also the informal sector. I know there's a lot of, I was talking and I'm told that there's a study that has been commissioned to understand the volume of trade that takes place across the borders. Now, you would agree with me that largely these issues are driven by women. And one of the major pain of women in the informal sector is access to credit. Is there any way UNDP is helping, particularly SMEs in Uganda, with regard to access to credit or financing?
Well, I think the issue around access to credit goes beyond UNDP,
Right.
and we have to always look at, because UNDP is not the panacea or would not be the panacea to the credit issues of everybody. I think that what I talked about is this trade facility that I talked about. If that happens, that will have a windows of how then women and youth will be able to assess. And so that's one way of looking at that. But also what is important in terms of is what we are doing with the banking sector. Because under our Youth for Business and Innovation facility, one of the things we are doing is, how then do we work with many banks, the Stanbics, the ABSAs, the Centenary banks, and we've started those conversations to say, well, if your interest is 12% or 14% for a young person or for a woman, can you give something less? Yeah. And what we try to do is to try to de-risk for them to invest. Right. And so when we support, for example, youth innovators, support them with training, capacity building, even invest in their businesses to the point where they then become, much more sustainable, or at least from the eyes of the private sector, we can do business with them, this is great. So these are some of the ways that we are trying to work with partners to enable that. But also the fact that even government itself has funding from government resources, but from other donors and partners as well, where we're having conversations. So how do you then align some of this funding much more strategically? I think what's going to be interesting for us, and we have been very much engaged in the parish development model, which is a model that Uganda is pursuing, where 30% of the funding that will go to the parish level, the lowest level of local government, would be to women. And so how do we make sure some of these things are used much more effectively? So I think I'll take much more of a broader approach to it. But I think what is, whilst our business model is not about giving money, the way we have invested in some of these sort of group of women, youth in itself, we've invested catalytic funding. We give funding, for example, up to about $40,000 grant funding to some of these women and youth. But also, we've also invested in other entities. For example, BRAC International, BRAC Uganda, to say, what can you do to support these women? And so we sort of partner with them, and we provide funding for them, and then they own grants to some of these partners on the ground. So really exciting. I think what we do hope is that we can increasingly, with the conversations around the protocol for women in EFCFT, be able to look for more specific instruments and mechanisms that women can tap into. But otherwise, I think it's very exciting for us. Yes.
Interesting. Let's talk about ICT. As you know, Africa is very, very well positioned to take off. But we can't do that without information technology. So what I want to find out from you is that is there any way UNDP is working with the Ugandan government? I know you mentioned you help them to, you work with them to launch their ICT protocols or whatever. Now, but how are you helping the government of Uganda in terms of ICT, particularly with the educational sector?
Well, first of all, I think we have a great partnership with the Ministry of ICT and with the Minister, with the Permanent Secretary, and we're doing some interesting work around that. I will not look at ICT from a very narrow point of view. Absolutely. I'll look at ICT in its entirety. So, again, it's always our practice that we work on the broader policy framework. And so what we have done with the Ministry of ICT recently is the Digital Transformation Roadmap. The Digital Transformation Roadmap spells out exactly how Uganda is going to leverage ICT for the future, including on scaling and education, which is great. But in addition to the Digital Transformation Roadmap, we've also supported the development of a digital skilling and acceleration program to accompany that, a big data strategy, a big data utilization strategy, because that's part of the ICT. How do you leverage the information that we're getting from your mobile phone to support that? So that broad policy framework is one that we are very excited about. But the other thing that we are doing, which we are very excited about, and I think in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we are going to launch a few of those, is that we are investing in spaces and areas where we can provide the actual physical space and not only the space, but the resources that allows young people especially to innovate. And so with the Ministry of ICT, we have completely renovated the National ICT Center in Nakawa. I think if you go there, you'll be inspired. And so what are we doing with that? We are not, you need to get into a space where you can create. And so we have repurposed the place, we have rebranded the place, we are providing equipment, computers and other things, especially for young people to do that. And then we do hope that at the beginning of December we will do that. But also to accompany that, we are establishing and supporting, or we are supporting the establishment of innovation pods. In Makerere University, for the very first time, we are establishing an innovation pod which allows young people, university students and people in the community to come into a space and be able to design.
Wow.
Come into a space to be able to collaborate. whether it's the ministry, is the Department of Engineering and Social Sciences. What is this thing that we want to create? Can we collaborate? So there's a collaborative space, a collab space, a maker space, a design space. There's a technology transfer office as well. And what this is to do is not only for the ICT, it goes beyond that. But when you have an idea of something, you should be able to touch it. And we're providing equipment that allows us to do that. So we are using the university space as well, because a lot of young people go through universities, and this is where they're creating. So whether it's in Makerere, we're also doing a similar one in Kabale University, and we are now trying to go into Gulu and other spaces as well. So we are using the university space as a way of challenging ideas, and also particularly those things that are digital in nature and ICT in nature. Here in Sasibwa, not far from where we are in Nakasero here, also we are working with the Kampala Capital City Authority, KCCA, to repurpose their employment center there. Again, we're putting, so ICT will be for music, ICT for
creative arts and
everything is there.
Good.
And hopefully we would also have a podcast there. Hopefully we'll be launching there. So it's also all these spaces that we. But also the third thing is that we must invest into ICT.
Right.
Because if young people have ideas, especially, but you don't invest to grow those ideas, it doesn't take us anywhere.
Right.
And so, again, like I said, through our Youth for Business facility, we've been investing. And it's very interesting because one of the young people we have supported, Akelo Banka is using fintech to support agriculture, is providing information and advice to farmers. And he's reaching already 150,000 people.
Interesting.
And expanding now to 350,000, and now he's going to go to Burundi. And so we are seeing a lot of, things to do with ICT. We are seeing young people who are using ICT for the tourism sector. So you don't have to go and see the gorillas, but with AI and other technologies, you can be able to visualize it. So agriculture, we're using it for creatives, we are using it for education and other things. So I think our support to the ICT Center is very exciting. Recently, we had conversation with the Minister for Innovation, Science and Technology.
Right.
Again, there's a whole partnership and conversation that we're having to see how do we then use STEM and support it right from the beginning in terms of pushing the development agenda of Uganda forward. So when people talk about ICT, people think it's just about a computer and a few other things. It's really how we're going to use, and this is the fourth industrial revolution, to use that to propel, whether it's agriculture, whether it's tourism, whether it's fintechs, and many other things that I think the sky is the limit. And
Absolutely.
we're very happy that we have disrupted a bit that space. And I think what is exciting is the fact that also COVID opened our eyes to set possibilities where we can leverage the power of ICT, and we are using it in all forms, including supporting drone technology to be able to monitor the animals that we have in our national parks and many, many more.
I'm listening to you and I'm looking at you, and I see you're very optimistic about the things that you're doing.
We have to be. We don't have an option.
Right. So my question is, with all that you're doing, if you hear about the unemployment rate in Africa, does that bother you?
It bothers me. And I tell my team here in UNDP that anytime we come from our street, because we are on a street called Yusuf Lule, it's a very busy street.
Yeah.
But whenever we come on that street, we see men and women running, trying to make a living, whether they are selling...
Whether it's winning or not, they're selling
bananas, they're selling what?
Yeah.
And what is also very important to acknowledge that the unemployment is happening across, but we have graduates who don't have, they don't have jobs. And I think in our case in Uganda, about 700,000 people come into the job market every year, and only about, 63,000, or less than maybe 10% of them can be absorbed by the public sector. And so what it means for me is to do some more. You have to feel some I don't want to use the word anger, but you must feel something to say, what then can I do?
And discomfort, if you like.
Discomfort, you must, since your religion, maybe you use the word godly anger or something,
sure.
to say, what then can I do about it? And so I think it's not just a job for us, because it's not just a 8 to 5 job. We earn a living, we go home. It's a mission.
Right.
And I think we must create opportunities for African youth, and we must do everything it takes in our power as UNDP badge to also call upon all actors to take this very seriously. Because also the continent, we are sitting on a time bomb if we don't have jobs. I mean, what do you want them to do? And some of the things that we are seeing in terms of the vices is purely because people don't just have an opportunity.
Right.
And then they have to fend for themselves. And sometimes the ways they use to fend for themselves is not what we want to see. But then they are pushed to do that. So it's not to holding brief for them, but I think we need to be able to tackle issues around unemployment head on.
Let's go back to the investing matter because of what we are talking about, the unemployment issue. Now, the private sector is complaining about a skills gap. Now, is there anything that UNDP is doing? I'm not aware, because I know one of your goals is the quality education and all of that. How is UNDP helping member states, here I'm talking broadly, at the continental level, to address the issue of skills gap?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think when you start off to say the private sector is complaining that there's a skill gap, I think we should have to ask the private sector, what can we do with the private sector to be able to
address the matter,
to address the issue. So I think for me that would be the starting point.
Right.
And part of the work that we have been doing with the private sector, especially on the entrepreneurship side, is to partner with them. It's non-financial. We don't give them money, they don't give us money, but we say this is where the needs are.
Right.
These are the training gaps and whatnot, and they take it forward. And I think we quite have some interesting body of work there. So I think we must engage with the private sector from a partnership point of view, not to say there is a gap, so can you UNDP fill? No, it's more about what can we do collectively. And I think that when you begin to look at it more broadly, then there are different entry points for us as UNDP.
Right.
We tending to look at it more from the entrepreneurship point of view, innovation point of view, building capacity, ensuring that the scaling is right. I mean, we have recently launched an SME skilling program, which is online, and where most SMEs can access. This is a big one for us, and it's great. And so those are some of the things that we are doing. But partnership matter. And so partnership with the UN other sister agencies becomes very important. Our partnership, for example, with UNICEF, where they're also supporting education, our partnership with UNESCO, our partnership with other entities as well becomes very important. So I think there's a space that we are also engaged in with the collective UN as part of the United Nations, for example, Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, which we all support, and we all have to work within this framework here in Uganda. But I think ultimately, the issue around scaling it needs to start right from the childhood, because if you train a child, for example, who is not assertive, they go into the business sector and they can't look people into the eye. And that's not good enough.
Right.
So even the culture needs to be, we need to evolve our culture. I recall when I was growing up, and you're looking straight into an adult side, they'll tell you, that's really rude, bring your eye down. And then, your mother or auntie or uncle will step on your toes just to bring you out. But in the business world, that seems to be not to be assertive. It means that you're timid.
Absolutely.
And so the skills gap is not only the practical things around training, capacity building, and carpentry and whatnot. It's also about confidence. It's also about mindset. It's also about other things that we can do in that space. So I think we have tried to tackle this from different angles, and we embed it in our programs. So our governance programs will have capacity building and training that is very much aligned to private sector work. Our climate work, we're sending a couple of young people to the Conference of Party next week. That is part of capacity building. But
Absolutely.
when they go there, how do they engage with the private sector in terms of green financing and green bonds? We will be sending, and I do hope that we will beat all the countries. We have an annual event called Youth Connect. It's going to happen in Kenya. And last year was in Rwanda with 10,000 young people. That's something that is supported and is a brainchild of UNDP, working with the governments that host it, plus also partners like Korea, Quaker, and others. And when you have 10,000 young people in the room, and here again, that's a great entry point for some of the work that and discussions we have with in terms of engagement with the private sector. So really, it's quite an interesting piece of work with the private sector through our own programs, through partnerships, through engagement, but also in the context of the SDGs. We are very conscious that the investment and financing for development is not going to come from the public sector only. In fact, the bulk of it is going to come from the private sector. And so within UNDP, in terms of what we are doing, we also have, for example, a finance hub. And we do have the Africa Finance Hub that is supporting our work across the region in terms of engagement with the private sector, which is great. We do have also a hub in Nairobi that is looking at resilience issues, is looking at issues around borderlands and how we work with the private sector in those spaces, and can go on and on and on. Right. So I think our technical support to different countries, our private sector specialists here, we do have a couple of them here, some of whom I think you've met, are driving and facilitating that conversation with the private sector. And here I'm quite happy that we do have quite some interesting work with the private sector. And also the private sector's work, I have to say, Doctor, it's not only about skilling that, you need to train them for us to use. Right. It's also about how they do their own businesses as well. So we are also very interested in business practices as well. And we have launched, for example, our gender equality seal, our gender equality seal for private sector, where we are saying that we want to make sure that your policies are also gender friendly, including providing opportunities for both men and women, wages that are at par for both men and women when they're doing the same job. So yeah, very, very interesting work. And I think finally on that point on private sector, we've also launched or we've been working across the region what we call the SDG investor maps. The SDG investor maps help us to look at where investment opportunities are. And investment opportunities is also where opportunities are to invest in human resources, but also where opportunities are there to invest in areas that will leverage that can be leveraged to support the development agenda of Uganda and other countries here.
Talking about gender issues here, there's a school of thought that says that if we had more women in senior public positions and all of that, Africa would have been different. Do you share the same view?
Well, now I don't know whether I'm going to be politically correct to say that, but I have my view is that, and with all due respect, anyway, my view is that. Women bring a certain perspective, and they do come with a certain level of passion and drive, which moves the agenda forward. And I think we have seen it across board in our continent, the role that women play, not only in terms of the household, but also in terms of how they help build economies, whether through the formal sector or informal sector. And I think if women are given more opportunities, they would complement and they would support the development agenda of country. I don't want to be seen to be have a strong bias against men or anything, but I just feel that if you and there's a saying which is attributed to one of the statesmen of Ghana to say, if you educate a woman, you educate a nation. It's just the profound understanding of the role of women. I think that's how I look at it. The profound understanding of the role of women to social, economic, and political development of nations, and therefore, the more we empower women, the more we can all collectively drive. And I think it's going to ultimately be a partnership. All of us need to be able to be involved.
I really admire your diplomacy, and I like the way you are going about it. But that's fine. In recent times, Africa became a member of the G20. What does that mean to the SMEs in particular, particularly women and young people?
Well, I'm not sure of. I mean, it's nascent.
Right.
It's nascent. So I think we will need to give ourselves some time to understand how this would pan out eventually. But I think the fact that Africa is on the table to discuss opportunities for the continent at that level, to give it a voice, to broker partnerships. To ensure that the priorities, the vision of the continent remains strong in those spaces, and whether it's on investment, whether it's on financing, whether it's on addressing global development challenges. I think for me, ultimately, if the voice is much stronger there, it will, by extension, trigger on the development agenda of the country, and then, of course, SMEs will benefit. But of course, I'm not able to establish a direct relationship. But I think that it will benefit the whole.
It's very new.
It's very new, but it will benefit the whole if we get it right. Yeah.
Right, Your Excellency. This program is about faith-based institutions as well. And the pedagogy is that we have a continent that many of the people are religious. Either they are Muslims or they are Christians, largely. But if you look at all the discourse at the continental level, faith-based institutions have been excluded. Now, what we are asking is, do you think it's about time that we brought faith-based institutions into the discourse?
Well, I think they've already been brought anyway. I think maybe the question would be what more we can do with them. In our case here in Uganda, I mean, we have the Interreligious Council of Uganda, IRCU, and we have partnered with them on a number of things, including the recent Ebola, because they have a reach where we cannot be. And so through our engagement with them and them communicating what the issues are, what needs to happen, even issuing pastoral letters in some cases, we feel that was a strong contributory factor to the fact that we were able to address.
Were they used as a medium, or they were an integral part of the discourse right from the beginning? I mean, not just with the Ebola issue, but all policy levels.
Well, I mean, again, like I said, we've had a strong relationship with a number of religious bodies, including way back, not even way before my time, during the time of the war, and previous resident representatives engaged, for example, with the Acholi religious leaders who were part of the conversation and so they were integral part of it, not just as a medium, integral part of it. And we do feel, in fact, we are just going to be launching our coffee book, hopefully in the next 2 months or so. That coffee book actually articulates very strongly some of the things that we did with Acholi religious leaders in ending the war with the Lord's Resistance Army. So
that's good.
So I think we have always engaged. Perhaps all of us can do some more. I feel very strongly that whether it's in the area of climate change, whether it's the area of youth empowerment. I mean, if you look at Uganda, and I think I can perhaps say that it may hold true for some other countries, you do have schools and hospitals that are supported or created by missionaries. And so I think they've always been part of it. So I'm not sure whether we should bring them or whether
strengthen the relationship.
Exactly, maybe strengthen the relationship in terms of not on the religious ideologies behind it, but on the developmental side of things, that I feel that can be utilized very strongly. And I think if we were to unpack what we can do with them, I think there are spaces that we have not touched yet, which we need to look at.
I was going to ask a question, but I won't ask, because if I ask, I know the answer. I was going to ask you, how do you see the future of Africa? But I think I know the answer from your optimism and the way you have articulated the things you are doing. So what it is said that what lasts most is not the buildings we leave behind or the money we have in our bank accounts, but in terms of the impact we make on people. How would Her Excellency Elsie Atefa would want to be remembered when he leaves Uganda?
Well,
and you are talking to the youth of Africa.
Yeah.
So largely using Uganda, but to the rest of the continent.
Well, I mean, look, I would like to be remembered for my contribution to the development agenda of Uganda. I feel very excited because at the time, and it's my first time being the representative, so we came in a time that, COVID hit, Ebola hits, climate crisis, war, everything. And so, yeah, the legacy is not to myself.
Right.
Is the fact that we were able to empower young people, and we were able to shift the thinking in many to say, let's look at the glass half full and not empty. I think that the fact that we have seen some great innovations that we have not seen before. Hopefully, some of them will become unicorns, and so I'm really excited. So, and I can only say it's a humble contribution.
Absolutely.
And so I also want to be remembered to be a Ugandan.
Ugandan.
Yeah, very Ugandan. I feel very much at home here.
Right.
I feel that I have a great connection, and I'll be back one way or the other.
Absolutely.
So yes, I want to be remembered for being a daughter of the soil.
Wonderful.
And a Ugandan, and one that did her bit while she was here.
Focus on the youth. What advice would you give them?
I mean, my own from where I sit, I think the advice is just the continent has great potential.
Absolutely.
Many a time when I have talked to young people, including people I live with in my own house, they're thinking about one day they will go for greener pastures. And I'm thinking the greener pastures are here. Because people tend to feel that they will do better elsewhere. But yet other people are coming here to become rich. So I think what I would is to stretch their imaginations and to see possibilities.
Absolutely.
In the continent. That is a continent that has great potential. Again, like I said, we have water, we have land, we have sun, we have minerals, we have everything. It is just paradoxical that we continue to wallow in poverty in certain parts of our continent. So it's to say the continent has great potential. Just ask yourself, what can I do? And how can I continue to lift the continent up to where it belongs? And I think once we can have that mindset change and shift, the power of the mind, I think, is very important. And I think if there's anything I can tell the young people, is to say it's a great opportunity for us. The world at this stage is a world that will require us again to look at the continent, how full, and a lot of people are looking to leadership on the continent, and they are the ones who have it. And so, yes, I encourage them to explore the opportunities and just invest in whatever it is, and make sure that they can utilize the great blessing that we have received as a continent here.
This has been Religion and Enterprise Television, and we have been at the UNDP office in Kampala, Uganda, talking to the representative of UNDP, Her Excellency Elsie Atefa. And in her concluding remarks, she said, let's have a mental shift, be positive about Africa, because Africa indeed holds a great promise for the world.
Africa needs you.